This morning, the official resale portal for the 2026 FIFA World Cup displays a figure that demands attention. 176,000 unsold tickets for the opening group stage matches held on United States soil, while FIFA projected a $40 billion economic windfall and the State Department anticipated an influx of 10 million international visitors. The reality on the ground reveals a host nation struggling to reconcile its domestic security posture with the logistics of a global event. The 2026 World Cup spans 3 nations, with the United States hosting 78 of the 104 total matches across 11 cities. This infrastructure was designed to serve as the tournament's primary economic engine, following years of planning and promises of a historic surge in tourism. Yet, according to an April 2026 report from the American Hotel and Lodging Association, 80% of hotels in these 11 U.S. host cities are reporting bookings significantly below initial forecasts. This is not a localized anomaly. It is a clear indicator that the anticipated global audience has largely chosen to stay away. The erosion of these projections began with a series of deliberate policy choices that transformed the United States from an accessible host into a restricted destination. 4 competing nations, Haiti, Iran, Ivory Coast, and Senegal, are currently subject to full travel bans. While their athletes received special exemptions to compete, their fans were categorically barred from entry. This created a paradoxical scenario where national teams represent their countries on the pitch, but their primary support base is legally prevented from cheering them on in the stands. This policy friction intensified just 2 days before the tournament opener, when FIFA revoked Iran's 8% ticket allocation. The Iranian Soccer Federation publicly characterized this as a targeted obstruction, a sentiment that resonated globally. The optics reached a breaking point when the Somali referee, Omar Abdul Qadir Artan, was refused entry into the United States. Images of fans in Mogadishu holding photographs of a referee who was deemed ineligible to perform his duties served as a powerful nonverbal indictment of the current U.S. entry landscape. Rapidly circulating through global sports media, the strategic fallout was immediate and measurable. An online petition in the Netherlands urging their national team to withdraw from the U.S.-hosted matches secured over 174,000 signatures, while a Facebook group dedicated to boycotting the 2026 tournament saw its membership balloon to over 25,800. These were not fringe concerns. They represented a growing consensus among international stakeholders. Even former FIFA president Sepp Blatter amplified calls for fans to avoid the United States, citing advice from Swiss legal experts that travelers face significant risks of being turned away at the border. The final element of this shift was the Department of Homeland Security's confirmation in May that ICE agents would be active within the stadiums. This decision landed in a volatile environment marked by reports of aggressive immigration enforcement and labor disputes at major venues like SoFi Stadium, where workers successfully negotiated contractual rights to walk off the job if federal agents appeared. That detail tells you exactly why the expected tourism surge evaporated. The perception of the United States shifted from a premier vacation destination to a high-risk zone where even those with valid documentation feared the legal and social climate. When analyzing the broader tourism data, the contraction becomes even clearer. In 2025, the United States was the only major global tourism destination to see a 6% decline in visitor numbers, according to the World Travel and Tourism Council. International visitor spending fell by 4.6% to $176 billion, while Canadian visitors, typically the largest source of U.S. tourism, dropped by 28% in January 2026 alone. Major carriers such as WestJet and Air Transat responded by cutting routes to U.S. cities, signaling a collapse in consumer confidence that even the gravity of the World Cup could not overcome. As the matches proceed, a strange dichotomy has emerged. While the United States struggles to fill its stadiums, Canada, hosting only 13 matches in Toronto and Vancouver, is seeing consistent growth in long-haul arrivals and active, engaged fan zones. International fans from Europe and elsewhere are gravitating toward the Canadian venues, effectively voting with their wallets for an alternative. that offers the excitement of the tournament without the perceived risks of U.S. border and security policies. If the objective of hosting the world's biggest event is to project influence and generate wealth, what does it mean when the global audience actively routes around the center of the stage? The tension surrounding the 2026 World Cup is not a byproduct of poor planning. It is the friction of two competing philosophies. On one side, the White House Task Force on the FIFA World Cup 2026, led by Executive Director Andrew Giuliani, has framed the tournament as an exercise in American exceptionalism, a platform to showcase national greatness and celebrate the country's 250th anniversary. On the other, the reality of strict visa proclamations and domestic security deployments has created a Fortress America experience that directly clashes with that narrative. Consider the official mandate. The U.S. government established a massive interagency task force, including a $625 million security funding pot for law enforcement overtime and high-tech equipment like counter-UAS mitigation, designed to make every stadium from a security perspective. To the Super Bowl. That detail tells you the government prioritized control and risk mitigation above all else, including the logistical requirements of welcoming millions of international guests. By treating a global cultural event like a high-threat security perimeter, the administration inadvertently signaled that its political security needs outweighed the hospitality expectations of the global soccer community. The economic data provides a brutal verification of this trade-off. FIFA's own socioeconomic impact report, which initially touted a $40 billion revenue promise, is now being contradicted by real-time figures like the 176,000 unsold group stage tickets. This is a direct consequence of a policy environment where, as of December 2025, nationals from 39 countries are subject to visa suspensions. When the U.S. Department of State justifies these restrictions through deficiencies in security screening, they are effectively choosing to narrow the tournament's demographic reach in favor of a rigid, security-first posture. This strategy reveals a deeper diplomatic calculation. During the Cold War, the U.S. and Soviet Union used athletic boycotts as leverage to signal geopolitical disapproval. Today, the 2026 tournament is effectively functioning as a reversed boycott by making the entry process so prohibitive that even fans from non-sanctioned nations are deterred by the threat of ICE presence or border denial. The U.S. has created an environment where international fans are choosing to bypass the centerpiece of the tournament. The fact that Canada and Mexico are seeing surging demand while U.S. host cities face empty seats indicates that the world is rerouting around American policy, not just because of the bans, but because of the atmosphere of intimidation created by the host rhetoric. The White House's rhetoric has consistently relied on the idea that the world wants to see the freedoms that America can bring. Yet, for many international observers, the imagery of stadium workers requiring contractual escape clauses to avoid potential contact with immigration enforcement agents undermines that very message. When workers at SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles demanded and received the right to walk off the job if federal agents appeared, they punctured the narrative of a seamless, welcoming event. That sequence is not coincidental. It is a direct policy consequence where domestic political theater collided with the practical demands of hosting an international sporting mega event. As the matches continue, the critical question is whether the United States can pivot from this fortress approach to salvage its reputation, or if the tournament will be permanently remembered as the moment the U.S. prioritized its internal security anxieties over its global soft power reach. The outcome will likely be decided by the knockout stages. If the stadiums remain half-empty for marquee matches, the economic damage will be locked in, and the 2026 World Cup will stand as a definitive case study in what happens when the logic of domestic border politics is applied to the theater of international cooperation. The transition from ambitious projections to the current reality of the 2026 FIFA World Cup reveals a fundamental tension between the high-level goals of global football integration and the sobering frictions of real-world geopolitics. While the tournament's sheer scale The unprecedented expansion to 48 teams and 104 matches remained the primary driver of the initial multi-billion-dollar economic forecasts. The actualized outcomes demonstrate that host nations cannot simply rely on the event's momentum to manufacture growth. For the United States, the primary host, the strategy has moved from anticipation of an explosive tourism windfall toward a more measured management of service sector gains, hampered by the persistent realities of visa barriers and fluctuating traveler confidence. Canada and Mexico, meanwhile, find themselves in a precarious but localized position, successfully capturing regional demand where the U.S. market has hit capacity constraints or suffered from perception-based deterrence. The strategic shift here for all actors is clear. The tournament is not a silver bullet for national economic trajectories, but rather a highly variable platform for regional promotion and localized hospitality performance. For the United States, the next moves must focus on mitigating the impact of the non-event narrative in the hospitality sector. With booking patterns trailing initial forecasts, the priority will likely shift toward localized marketing and leveraging existing infrastructure, such as the established capacities in cities like Miami and New York, to sustain service sector activity through the tournament's conclusion. For Canada, the success observed in Vancouver and Toronto serves as a blueprint for long-term sports tourism development. The focus will be on converting short-term, group-oriented visitor interest into lasting brand visibility. For the global stakeholders, Europe, India, and emerging football markets, the takeaway is equally stark. The era of the guaranteed economic boom from hosting mega events is largely over. Future investment strategies will need to pivot away from relying on total spend estimates and toward more granular, sector-specific assessments of return on investment. The likely next stage in this trajectory is a period of consolidation, where host cities and national organizers reassess the cost-benefit analysis of infrastructure maintenance versus temporary event hosting, particularly as the high costs of compliance and security operations begin to manifest in municipal balance sheets. The overarching pattern is one of decoupling. The tournament's success as a global media and consumption platform remains undisputed, yet its ability to function as a reliable macroeconomic catalyst has been significantly blunted by geopolitical and logistical friction. While the event will undoubtedly deliver localized economic pulses and record-breaking engagement figures, it serves more as a mirror reflecting the current complexities of North American tourism and immigration policy than as a transformative economic force. The core insight remains that visibility is not synonymous with prosperity. The tournament's true legacy will be defined not by the aggregate revenue it generates, but by how effectively individual host cities transform a temporary, high-cost spotlight into a resilient, long-term asset for their own international competitiveness. The World Cup 2026 serves as a definitive reminder that even the world's most potent cultural events must ultimately contend with the gravity of local policy and the limits of consumer appetite.